The woman who should have been choosing her wedding flowers was instead listening to the man she loved plan to rob her of every last coin. She stood frozen outside the door. Her hands trembled. Her heart stopped. His voice cut through the wood like a sharp blade, too clear, too specific, impossible to misinterpret. "She has no idea how much her family's land is worth," he said, laughing. A laugh she knew so well, but which now sounded like a stranger's. 7 days. 7 days, and all of it will be mine." The reply came from another voice, a male voice she also recognized, his best friend. "What if she finds out? What if someone tells her?"
Is that what you think?
"Tells her what?" The groom's voice was full of arrogant confidence. "She loves me. She's completely blind. Yesterday she even showed me the property documents. Can you believe it? Said she wanted me to feel like part of the family before the wedding." He laughed again. Sentimental idiot. Her legs gave way. She leaned against the wall, her breath caught in her throat. His apartment hallway, where she'd spent countless afternoons, suddenly felt like a trap closing in around her. Her purse fell from her shoulder. She didn't even notice. "What about the construction business?" The friend's voice continued. "Can you really divert the funds without her noticing? She's a romantic, not a businesswoman." The contempt in his voice was palpable. "She signs whatever I put in front of her. Trusts me completely. In 3 months, I'll have transferred enough to cover my debts and still have enough to start from scratch. Alone." "Alone? You're going to leave her?" "Why would I stay with a woman foolish enough to hand over her entire fortune to a man she's barely known for a year?" Her world crumbled. Not all at once, not with a dramatic bang, but slowly, like glass shattering in slow motion. Every word he said broke another piece of what she thought was true. Every laugh destroyed another memory she had treasured. She had believed him. Christ, how she had believed him. The bride was Amara, a 32-year-old woman who had built her empire brick by brick. She wasn't just rich, she was shrewd, smart, independent. She had built a textile import business that thrived in 3 countries. She had investments that generated enough passive income to support 3 families. She owned properties that increased in value every year, and she had deliberately hidden all of it from him. When she met Kwame a year ago at a business conference in Accra, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. He was charming, attentive, seemed genuinely interested in who she was, not what she had. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, her past. He listened, or at least she thought he did. But Amara was not naive. She had learned from her grandmother, a wise matriarch who had outlived 3 husbands and built a trading empire when women were still considered property. Her grandmother had held Amara's face in her hands months before she died and said, "Child, a true partner values your heart before your harvest. Test it. Always test it." So Amara tested him. She didn't mention her properties or her investments. She wore simple clothes, drove a modest car, lived in a comfortable apartment. Nothing flashy. She presented herself as a regular businesswoman, someone who did well for herself, but nothing that would turn heads. And Kwame passed the test, or at least she thought he had. He stuck around. 6 months later, he proposed in a quiet restaurant with a modest ring he claimed he'd been saving for. She cried. She said yes. She believed she'd found what her grandmother had always spoken of. A man who loved her for who she was, not what she owned. How blind she had been. Amara closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cold hallway wall. Tears came silently, hot, furious. She made no sound. She couldn't. If she did, they would hear her. And she wasn't ready for that confrontation. Not yet. Because while her heart was shattering, her mind was starting to work. The pieces clicked into place. His sudden interest in helping with her business paperwork. The so-called innocent questions about her assets. His push to meet her accountant. The reasonable suggestion that they consolidate their finances before the wedding to simplify things. She'd thought he was being thoughtful, protective, a real partner. He was just cataloging what he planned to steal. 7 days. His voice echoed from the room. 7 days, and she's legally mine. Then, brother, the real work starts. Amara opened her eyes. The tears were still flowing, but something else was rising inside her. Something that consumed the pain. It wasn't just anger, though she had enough of that to level mountains. It was something colder, sharper, more lethal. Resolve. She pushed off from the wall, grabbed her purse, wiped her face. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing was steady now. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Once she reached the stairwell, out of earshot, she pulled out her phone. 23 unread messages. 5 from her mother asking about final wedding details. 3 from the seamstress confirming the last dress fitting. 2 from the event planner double-checking seating arrangements. All of them assuming the wedding would proceed as planned. Amara stared at the messages for a long moment. Then she slid the phone back into her pocket without replying to any of them. Her wedding dress hung in her bedroom closet. It was a masterpiece hand-embroidered with beads that shimmered like starlight. It cost more than Kwame made in a year. She'd been saving for this dress her whole life, imagining the moment she'd walk toward a man who actually loved her. Now, it felt like a funeral shroud. The invitations had already gone out. 230 guests. Half were her family and friends, the other half people Kwame had insisted on adding. Close connections, he'd called them. People who matter to me. Now she saw the truth. They were his audience, witnesses he wanted to impress to make his con work. The reception was booked at the city's most upscale venue. Catering was ordered. A band was hired. She'd spent weeks writing beautiful vows, every word meaningful, every promise sincere. All of it for nothing. She thought about canceling, simply ending everything, sending Kwame away, cutting her losses, and moving on. It would be the sensible thing to do, the safe thing. But Amara wasn't feeling sensible, and she definitely wasn't feeling safe. She felt like a woman who'd been underestimated, and she understood, with absolute certainty inherited from her grandmother and all the women before her who survived in a world designed to shut them up, that being underestimated could be the deadliest weapon she possessed. What will people think? A voice whispered in her head, her mother's voice, forever obsessed with what others would say, forever measuring everything by outside judgment. Amara smiled, a thin, cold smile. Let them talk. She'd stopped living for their approval long ago. How can you possibly survive the shame? Her own doubt whispered. But the answer came, clear as day. She wouldn't be the one facing it. He would. For the next 2 days, Amara was on autopilot. She saw family, smiled when expected, went along with plans. She had dinner with Kwame. Let him kiss her. Listened to him describe their future in that smooth voice she now knew was pure poison. "I can't wait to spend forever with you," he said, holding her hand across the table. "Same," she replied, and managed to make tears glisten in her eyes. He pulled her close at the end of the evening, whispering in her ear, "You make me so happy, Amara. So happy." She whispered back, "You make me happy too, Kwame." And no true word was spoken. Inside, Amara was strategizing, assembling her defense, counting down. 7 days until the ceremony where she was supposed to become his wife, sign away her life, her money, her future to a man who saw her as a walking ATM. 7 days to flip the script in ways he'd never expect. She made a plan. First, lock down her assets. She'd already begun quietly moving documents, undoing the changes Kwame had suggested. Her lawyer, a careful man who'd worked with her family for years, was handling it all without prying. Second, get evidence. She needed more than just overheard words documents, messages, anything proving his scheme. She hired a private investigator, paid cash, demanded complete confidentiality. Third, and most important, plan exactly how she'd blow this wide open. Because Amara didn't just want to save herself. She wanted accountability. She wanted Kwame to experience even a taste of what she felt when her world crumbled in that hallway. She wanted him to learn that underestimating a woman was the costliest error he'd ever make, and she knew exactly how to make it happen. 3 days before the wedding, Amara sat in her lawyer's office, looking at a pile of documents. The man across the table, Mr. Okafor, watched her with a mixture of concern and respect. "Are you sure about this, Amara?" he asked, his voice low. "Once we do this, there's no going back." She looked at him, her eyes dry, no tears, just ice. Completely sure. He's going to be devastated. "Well," she said, picking up the pen, "he should have thought twice before planning to steal from me." She signed the dotted line. Then the next page. And the next. Every signature was a sentence being handed down, a declaration of war wrapped in legal language. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair, feeling something she hadn't felt in days: control. "Will this work?" she asked. Okafor smiled, a rare expression on his usually serious face. "Oh, it will work, and he'll never know what hit him." "Good," Amara said. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, transforming once again into the radiant bride everyone expected to see. "Because if he wants my fortune, he's going to have to face me first." As she left the office, the sun was dropping over the city, the sky ablaze in red and gold. Amara looked at that horizon and felt something crystallize inside her. Not the ache of a shattered heart anymore. Something fiercer. Conviction. 7 days until the wedding. 7 days that Kwame was likely counting down, already fantasizing about emptying her accounts. He was gearing up for a victory lap, a celebration of how brilliant he thought he was, the start of his criminal empire. But while he plotted to steal her future, Amara plotted to dismantle his. And she had the perfect plan. It would be public. It would be unforgettable. It would be the kind of moment people would talk about for years. Because her grandmother had taught her more than just how to read a man's character. She'd taught her that a woman who knows her value should never let someone undermine her without making them pay. And the consequences coming for Kwame would be something he would never forget. 7 days, she thought, getting into the car. 7 days to plan something he'll never see coming. While he prepared to steal her future, she prepared to steal his dignity. She started where all investigations begin, with the money. That night, alone in her apartment, the bride opened her financial files with hands that barely shook. Not from fear, from controlled fury. Every document was another piece of a puzzle finally coming together. The family properties, the business investments, the inheritance from her grandmother, all documented, all organized, all at risk. Then she saw it. The pattern, all those innocent questions he'd been asking. "Babe, are your lands under family ownership or in your name? Which bank holds these investments? Did your grandmother leave a will or go straight to you?" She'd thought he was just curious about her, being caring, wanting to understand her completely. But it was surveillance, intelligence gathering. He was cataloging her wealth like a general planning a takeover. And she, desperate to share her life, had given him everything like she was sharing a recipe. How stupid she'd been. No, she corrected herself. Not stupid. Human, trusting, hopeful. He was the predator. She opened her laptop and started searching. If he had an accomplice, as the conversation suggested, then there was a trail. There always was. 3 hours of digging through social media, public records, mutual connections. Then she found him, his cousin, Marcus. Not just a cousin, his right hand, his best man. The guy at every family meal, every meeting with her parents, every event. Perpetually smiling. Always charming. The life of every party. She remembered him at the engagement party, chatting with her father about business, winning over a man who trusted no one. She remembered him carrying groceries for her mother, that warm smile. Family looks after family, Auntie. Family. The word made her sick. She found an old photo on Marcus's profile. He was at another wedding, a fancy one, next to a glowing bride she'd never seen. With shaking hands, she researched. The bride's name was tagged. She pulled up her profile, then searched local news. And there it was, buried in old articles from 3 years back. Divorce, fraud charges, a police investigation that went nowhere because there wasn't enough proof. She dug deeper. Another woman. Another wedding. Another fast, quiet divorce. She wasn't first. Third, at least. Maybe more. Who knew how many victims there were? The betrayal had been devastating. But this? This was calculated. Industrial. They'd turned romance into a business model. A rehearsed con, perfected through the suffering of the women before her. How many nights had he practiced those tender words? How many times had Marcus perfected that smile? How many times had they split the money and moved on to the next mark? Bile rose in her throat, but underneath it came something stronger, something colder. Fury. If they'd done this before, they thought they had it figured out. Thought she'd follow their playbook. That she'd discover too late, or never at all, or break under the shame. They never expected her to fight back. She closed her laptop. For just a moment, she let herself think about who he was, not the monster he'd revealed himself to be, but the man she thought she loved. Who was he really? She needed to understand. Not forgive him, never forgive him. But to stop him, she needed to know how he thought. So she dug, and found the story he'd never told her. His family had been wealthy once. His father, a successful businessman, then disaster struck. Failed investments. Maybe corruption, maybe just bad luck. They lost it all. The house, the social standing, everything. He was 15. Old enough to remember the good life. Too young to understand that money doesn't define a man. He grew up starving for what he'd lost. That desperate need to reclaim his status. To prove he was more than his father's failure. Somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing love as real and started seeing it as a weapon. A strategy. A path back to the top. He probably told himself she wouldn't notice the money disappearing. That she was so rich it wouldn't matter. That his love could coexist with the theft, two separate realities. He'd rationalized every move, justified every lie. Told himself he wasn't the villain. Just a guy doing what needed to be done to survive. There's an old saying. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. He wasn't a comic book villain. He was worse. He was a man who'd picked betrayal over truth, control over vulnerability. He'd seen two paths, one where he asked for help, admitted weakness, built something real. Another where he stole what he wanted. He chose the second, and that choice made him fully, completely responsible. There was no excuse. There were only consequences. She grabbed her phone. There was only one person she could call. Someone who'd understand without asking, be furious without questions, help without hesitation. Her sister picked up on the second ring. It's midnight. Did someone die? Maybe. The bride's voice was eerily calm. My wedding. There was a beat. Then her sister's voice changed. Hard, focused, ready. What did he do? The bride told her everything. The overheard conversation, the investigation results, the cousin's involvement, the other victims, the whole pattern. Each word felt like a confession and an accusation. When she finished, the silence lasted only 3 seconds. Her sister went ballistic. I'm going to kill him. I swear I will. Where is he? No, wait. He's at your place some nights, right? I'm coming over right now and... Stop. Stop? Stop? That bastard was planning to steal your inheritance and you want me to... I'm not saying we do nothing. I'm saying forget murder and think bigger. Her sister took a deep breath. Once. Twice. Okay. I'm listening. I can't just cancel the wedding. Why the hell not? Because then he just moves on to the next one. Marcus too. And I'm the fool who ran away crying. The sister was silent, processing. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting he wants a wedding? Then he's going to have a wedding? You're not serious. I'm completely serious. You're going to marry him, even knowing... I'm walking down that aisle in the dress. I'm standing at that altar. I'm looking him dead in the eye in front of everyone. And then... The bride smiled, cold, calculated. And then I'm going to do something he'll never forget. Her sister was silent for a long moment. Then she started to laugh, not a joyful laugh. A laugh of pure, satisfied revenge. You're insane. Maybe. I love it. I know. Okay. So what do we need to do? We need evidence. Concrete. Incontestable. Do you have the recorded messages? I do, but I need more. financial records, text conversations, anything that shows their plan in detail. Her sister was already thinking. The bride could hear her brain working through the phone. Marcus still uses that ancient phone for everything, yeah? The one he leaves lying on the table? Yeah. The rehearsal dinner is in 4 days. I can make a scene and you can copy his phone in 90 seconds flat if I have the equipment. Do you have the right device? No, but I know where to get one. The two fell silent, the reality of what they were planning sinking in. This is absolutely insane, her sister said quietly. I know. Are you sure? Because once we start this, there's no turning back. The bride looked out the window at the sleeping city outside. Somewhere in that city, the groom was sleeping soundly. Perhaps dreaming of the life he would build with her money. Perhaps already planning how he would discard her afterward. He thought she was like the others. Another woman too in love and too blind to see it. He was wrong. I'm completely sure, she said, and her voice didn't waver even a little. He wants a wedding that will impress everyone? Then that's what he's going to get. A wedding no one will ever forget. What about Marcus? Marcus will be there too, smiling, celebrating, thinking the plan worked perfectly, until it doesn't. Exactly. Her sister sighed, but it was a sigh of acceptance, of commitment. So we have 4 days to gather evidence, plan this out, and figure out exactly how you're going to destroy him in front of 200 witnesses. 3 days, the bride corrected. The 4th day I need to be steady, in control, ready. Can you do it? The bride thought about it. About the love she had felt. About the betrayal that now burned where that love used to be. About the other women who came before her, who perhaps weren't lucky enough to find out in time. I'll do it, she said. Not just for me. For every woman they've already hurt. And for every one they'd hurt next. She could hear the smile in her sister's voice. All right. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my place. Bring coffee, bring that fire. We're going to need both. I'll be there. They hung up. The bride sat in the darkness a moment longer. Then she opened a blank document and started typing. Evidence, timeline, resources, contingency plans. Every word was a step forward, turning pain into ammunition, betrayal into accountability. She didn't know exactly how it would play out at that altar yet. But one thing was crystal clear. The wedding was happening. But not the way he thought it would. She walked into the law firm on a Tuesday, 3 days before the wedding. The lawyer looked up and frowned. The woman before him was polished, composed, carrying a leather briefcase, and a look that mixed steel with icy calm. Let me make sure I understand, he said, pushing his glasses up. You want to do what at the altar? She sat down, crossed her legs, met his gaze. No hesitation, no fear. I want legal cover before I expose him in front of everyone. The lawyer leaned back, genuinely stunned. 15 years in law, he'd never had a request like this. Weddings, sure. Divorces, absolutely. But this was something else entirely. Walk me through this, he said, opening his notepad. And she did. Everything. The conversation she'd overheard. The laughter. How coldly they discussed stealing from her. How he performed love while doing the math on asset transfers. How his accomplice called her an easy target. The lawyer sat silent. When she finished, he asked the only question that mattered. How much money? She opened the briefcase. Financial statements, property deeds, bank records, stock certificates. 8 million in inheritance, she said coolly. 3 companies I built from nothing, pulling in 2 million a year combined. Properties across 5 states, including farmland worth 4 million. The lawyer set down his pen, looked up, eyes wide. This isn't a wedding, he said quietly. It's a hostile takeover he's attempting. Exactly. She understood her power. She knew what she'd created, and she understood exactly what he wanted. The prenup, she said, sliding a document across. He signed it blindfolded. I thought I'd never need it, but... The lawyer scanned it. His eyes grew wider. Complete asset separation, infidelity clause, fraud penalties. He let out a low whistle. You were always ahead of him. Always. For the next 2 hours, they built her case. divorce papers pre-written, asset freeze orders already authorized, protective measures against transfers that hadn't even been attempted yet. And the confrontation? The lawyer asked. What exactly will happen at the altar? She smiled, her first real smile since walking in. You'll see it when everyone else does. As she left with everything in place, the groom was across town, still playing the loving fiancé, still thinking he was 10 moves ahead. He showed up at her place that afternoon with flowers, red roses, what he thought were her favorites. Babe, he said, kissing her forehead. 3 days. I can't wait to have you as my wife. She smiled back. Soft, sweet, the kind he took for weakness. But inside, she was counting down. 3 days, 72 hours, and then it all ends. Did you choose the songs for the ceremony? She asked, serving coffee. I chose the one you love, Ave Maria. It will be perfect. Perfect. He loved that word. Everything had to be perfect. The church, the flowers, the facade. That night, after he left, she stayed alone in the room. She looked at the wedding dress hanging in the closet. White, immaculate, traditional. And then, she took out the divorce papers hidden in the drawer. She reread every line, every clause, every word that would destroy his plan. But alongside the satisfaction came doubt. What if I bottle it? She whispered to the empty room. What if love softens me at the last second? She imagined it. The altar, the packed church. Him, that smug grin. Her, flowers in hand. Everyone holding their breath for the vows. What if she choked? What if, when the moment came, the good memories made her hesitate? She closed her eyes, breathed deeply. It was then that her sister called. Are you still firm? The voice on the other end of the line asked, soft but determined. I'm terrified, she admitted. Terrified I'll waver. Terrified I'll choose wrong. Listen, her sister said gently but firmly. You're not losing love. You're choosing yourself. And that, sis, that's the real love story. The words sank in. She wasn't destroying love. She was destroying the con, the fantasy, the theft dressed up as romance. Real love doesn't plan a heist. Real love doesn't mock you for trusting it. Real love doesn't do math on how fast it can drain your accounts. She hung up and looked back at the papers. This time, she didn't hesitate. That night, she dreamed of her ancestors. Strong women from generations before who survived betrayals, fought injustice, and showed men who underestimated them. In the dream, they whispered to her, a woman who takes back her power shows every other woman what they're capable of. She woke before sunrise, heart racing in her chest. 3 days became 2, then 1. Finally, Saturday came, the wedding day. The church was overflowing. Guests from both families in their best clothes waiting, flowers everywhere, candles burning, soft music in the air. Outside, photographers were ready. Everything coordinated perfectly. The reception would be lavish. The cake, massive. The celebration, once in a lifetime. Or at least, that was the plan. The groom stood at the altar, fixing his tie repeatedly, smiling at guests, charming aunts and cousins with practiced ease. Inside his head, he was running the clock down. Soon, she'd be legally his. And with her would come everything. The money, the businesses, the properties. He daydreamed about his new life, travel, expensive cars, freedom from having to work. She'd never catch on. She was too in love, too trusting. At least, that's what he thought. In the bridal suite, the bride stood at the mirror. The dress was perfect. The veil delicate, flowing completed the fairy tale image. But tucked inside her bouquet of white roses, hidden in the stems, were divorce papers. She touched them, felt the weight, the density of her decision. There was no backing out now. A makeup artist entered, beaming. You're absolutely stunning. Ready for this? The bride nodded silently, because this moment would be nothing like anyone expected. Outside, the music started. The wedding march. Time. The doors would open in seconds. Everyone would stand. He'd be waiting at the altar, waiting for his target, waiting for his payday, waiting for a wedding that would become something else entirely. She gripped the bouquet, felt the papers hidden inside. She breathed in and stepped toward the aisle. Everyone expected a wedding. What they'd witness was judgment. The doors swung open. Music filled the church. She walked, step by step, toward the altar, toward the man who'd miscalculated her, toward the truth he never saw coming. Each step was an act of defiance, each meter a silent announcement of her power. Guests gasped in admiration. What a stunning bride, absolutely flawless. This is magical. But they had no clue, no idea what was about to unfold. The groom saw her at the end of the aisle and smiled. His confident grin, his victory smile, as if he'd already won, as if she was just another pawn in his game. But she was ahead. Always had been. From day one. And now, in front of everyone, she was going to show him. The music played on. She kept walking. Beneath the flowers, divorce papers waited. For the moment, his game fell apart. For when everyone learned who really held the cards, she reached the altar, faced him. He offered his hand, grinning. She took it, and returned the smile, because she knew exactly what came next. The music began. A soft piano, delicate violins, the kind of melody that makes people cry before they even understand why. The double doors of the chapel slowly opened, and there she was, the bride. White dress flowing like water, delicate veil framing her face, bouquet of white roses in her hands. She looked like something out of a fairy tale. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, creating a mosaic of colors on the aisle. Every step was measured, deliberate, laden with meaning that only she fully understood. The guests stood, cameras clicked, someone emotionally sobbed. Everything was perfect, except it wasn't. Because inside that immaculate bouquet, hidden among petals and stems, were divorce papers. And inside that bride's heart, where joy should have been, there was a cold, icy resolve. She looked ahead. There he was, the groom, waiting at the altar. His face was a mask of pride and anticipation, eyes shining, broad smile, erect posture, almost imperial. He saw himself as the conqueror, the clever man who had found the perfect path to wealth. She could see it. In the way he looked at her, there was no love. There was calculation. He was already mentally spending her money, already imagining the bank accounts, the properties, the investments. Every step she took towards him was, in his mind, a step towards his financial empire. But for her, each step was different. It was a step towards justice, a step towards truth, a step towards the moment when the whole world would see who he really was. Her heart pounded, not from romantic nervousness, from pure adrenaline, the kind an athlete feels before a competition, a soldier before battle. She had dreamed of this walk her whole life. Just not like this. Not knowing what she knew, not carrying what she carried. She reached the altar. Her father, who accompanied her, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Be happy, my daughter." If only he knew. But he would know. Soon, everyone would know. The officiant smiled warmly, the Bible open in his hands. "Welcome, friends and family, to this sacred union." His voice was gentle, full of reverence. He had no idea he was presiding not over a wedding, but a social execution. The ceremony began. Biblical readings about love and commitment, a song of worship, a prayer for their union, each traditional element fulfilled with precision, as if it were a script that could not be altered. And through it all, she watched the groom respectfully bow his head during the prayer, hands clasped, a solemn expression. What an actor. What an impeccable performance. If she didn't know the truth, she might even believe it. Watched the guests, faces illuminated by smiles, some with tears in their eyes. They saw romance. They saw true love. They saw the beginning of a happy life. The irony was almost unbearable. Watched her sister, sitting in the third row, who was the only one besides her to know the plan. Their eyes met for a brief second. An almost imperceptible nod. Silent confirmation. I'm here. You're not alone. When the time comes, I'll be ready. The officiant raised his hand. And now, the vows. The moment when these two young people will publicly declare their love and commitment to each other. He turned to the groom. You may begin. The groom took a deep breath. He had rehearsed. This was obvious. Every word, every pause, every inflection had been carefully planned. He looked into her eyes, took her hands, and began. My love, when I met you, I knew my life had changed forever. His voice trembled emotionally, his gestures theatrical yet restrained. You are the woman of my dreams, the partner I've always searched for. And today, before God and everyone present here, I make these promises to you. She kept her face neutral, serene, the perfect bride, listening to the vows of the man she loves. I promise to love you through good days and bad days. I promise to support you in all your dreams and ambitions. I promise to be your refuge when the world is too harsh. Each sentence sounded sincere. Each word seemed genuine. What a talent for lying. And then came the phrase, the one she would never forget. The one that summed up all his hypocrisy in a single perfect sentence. I promise to honor what is yours as if it were my own. Silence. The guests sighed emotionally. Some people cried. It was so beautiful, so romantic, so perfect. Except that was exactly his plan. To honor what was hers as if it were his own, because in his mind it soon would be. Totally, completely, undividedly. She almost smiled. Almost. The irony was so brutal that for a moment she almost admired his audacity. To hide the truth within his very declaration, to promise to do exactly what he planned, but with words that sounded virtuous. I promise to protect you, to respect you, to honor you every day of my life. You are my best friend, my true love, and now, my wife. I love you more than words can express. He squeezed her hands. Tears, real tears, formed in his eyes. How could he do it? How could someone lie with such conviction? The guests applauded. It wasn't traditional, but they couldn't help themselves. Such beautiful vows. Such a passionate man. Such true love. She looked at him. Truly looked. Memorizing that moment. The confidence in his face. The certainty of victory. The gleam in the eyes of someone who believes he fooled everyone perfectly. Every word is a lie, she thought. But not for much longer. The officiant smiled widely, clearly moved. Beautiful vows. Truly beautiful. He turned to her. And now, the bride. The moment had arrived. The hall fell into absolute silence, the kind of silence where you can hear people breathing. The creak of chairs. The subtle rustle of dresses. She let go of his hands, slowly, deliberately, and looked not at him, but at the guests, swept the room with her eyes. Family, friends, colleagues, people she loved, people who believed they were celebrating the beginning of something beautiful, then looked at him again, directly into his eyes, and something in her gaze changed. It became colder, more determined, more dangerous. His smile faltered, only for a fraction of a second. Something in his instinct, in that calculating brain, detected danger. But he didn't know where it came from. So he recomposed himself, maintained the mask. She turned her head slightly, met her sister's eyes again. A tiny nod. Final confirmation. And then, instead of taking the small slip of paper with prepared vows that would traditionally be hidden in the bouquet, she held the bouquet with one hand. With the other, she reached for something different. Her phone. Some guests furrowed their brows, confused. A cell phone during the vows? How strange, how rude. The groom also frowned. My love, he whispered, so low that only she could hear. What are you doing? She didn't answer. Instead, she raised the cell phone for everyone to see, and she spoke, her voice clear, firm, without a tremor. I have something to say. But first, I want you all to hear something. Confusion, murmurs. What was happening? This wasn't in the script. Weddings have a script. Traditional vows, rings, a kiss. This was improvisation. The groom tried to smile. Darling, maybe we can… Listen, she interrupted. Firm, final. And she pressed play. First, static, then voices. Her own voice. So it's true? You're really doing this just for the money? And then, his voice. That same voice that seconds ago had declared eternal love. But now, on a recording, saying something completely different. Of course it's for the money. Do you think I'd put up with this woman for any other reason? She's boring, but rich, very rich. And when we get married, half of everything becomes mine. Maybe more, if I play my cards right. Silence, absolute, deadly. And then the other voice on the recording, the accomplice. What if she finds out? Laughter, his laughter. She won't find out. She's too in love. Trusts me completely. It's almost sad how easy it is. Gasps. Throughout the hall. Hands over mouths, eyes wide. Incredulous whispers. The groom's face was no longer flushed with emotion. It was white, ghastly, as if all the blood had instantly drained. His eyes, once bright with confidence, were now wide, in pure panic. This isn't… He tried to speak. The words wouldn't come out. How to explain the inexplicable. How to undo what was being exposed. The recording continued. More details, more confessions. The plan to access her accounts. How he had researched property division laws. How he already had a lawyer prepared to maximize his share. Every second of audio was another blow. Another brick in the crumbling castle of lies. She turned off the cell phone. The silence that followed was of a different kind. It wasn't the silence of romantic anticipation. It was the silence of collective shock, of shared horror, of witnesses to a real-time disaster. The officiant was pale, unsure what to do. This was definitely not in the ceremony manual. Her father had stood up, fists clenched. His mother was crying, not tears of joy, but of shame. The groomsmen and bridesmaids looked at each other, lost. And in the center of it all, the groom, exposed, unmasked, destroyed. She looked at him, without anger, without sadness, just with the cold calm of someone executing a perfectly calculated plan. Now, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, I have my true vows for you. And she reached inside her bouquet. This time, it wasn't a cell phone. It was papers, official documents, with seals, with lawyers' signatures. In the silence that followed, she held up the papers so he could clearly see the bold title at the top of the first page, Papers that would change everything. The recording ended, but the audio continued to echo in the minds of everyone present. The groom's voice was unmistakable, clear, confident, predatory. As soon as we're married, I'll have access to everything. Absolute silence. 200 people processing what they had just heard. The groom looked around, eyes wide, face pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. This isn't… I can explain… The bride cut him off. Her voice, calm and powerful, filled the sacred space. Explain to these divorce papers? She raised her hand. Between her fingers, an official envelope. Sealed. Prepared. The altar, which moments ago seemed like the setting for a fairy tale, now transformed into a courtroom. And the bride was no longer the victim. She was the judge. She opened the envelope with deliberate movements. Every gesture calculated. Every second extended for maximum impact. The papers emerged. White. Official. Undeniable. I came here today not to marry you, she declared, her voice echoing to the farthest corners of the church. I came to legally protect myself from you. Murmurs erupted through the congregation, but the bride continued, relentless. This document, she held the papers high, is a prenuptial agreement that protects every penny of my assets, And these, she pulled out another set of papers, are the divorce documents, ready to be signed should you try to contest. A man in a dark suit stood up in the front row. Her lawyer. He walked to the altar with firm steps. "I confirm," he said, his professional voice echoing through the church, "that all these documents are legally valid. The lady has full rights to her assets. Sir," he looked at the groom with thinly veiled disdain, "you have no legal claim to anything that is hers." The groom recoiled. His face went through a rapid metamorphosis. Denial, rage, despair. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is our wedding." The bride stared at him. Her eyes, which once looked at him with love, now held only a cold clarity. "No," she said simply. "This is my liberation." The church erupted in reactions, but they were not the indignant shouts the groom expected. They were expressions of shock, of understanding, of growing support. The bride's mother stood up, tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, from fierce pride. She walked to the altar and stood beside her daughter, a silent sentinel. The bride's father followed her, then her sister. One by one, her family formed a human shield between her and the man who tried to steal from her. On the other side, the groom's family cowered. Their mothers looked down. His brothers avoided eye contact. Shame visibly consumed them. Then, a voice emerged from the crowd. A community elder, respected for decades. He slowly rose, leaning on his cane. "This woman," he said, his voice trembling not from weakness, but from contained emotion, "has shown more wisdom than many of us. She saw the truth where we wanted to see only celebration." He looked directly at the groom. "And you, young man, have brought dishonor not only upon yourself, but upon all of us who witnessed this day." Community validation flowed like a wave. Heads nodded, voices murmured approval. The bride was not alone. She never was, but the story didn't end there. A woman in the crowd pointed, her trembling finger directed at a man trying to hide behind other guests. "There!" she cried. "The cousin! He was with the groom!" The cousin froze. All eyes turned to him. "I saw him," the woman continued, her voice gaining strength. "In the apartment, helping to plan, laughing about how easy it would be." The cousin tried to back away, but the crowd closed around him, not with violence, only with presence, preventing his escape. The bride looked at him, and then, in a low but audible voice, she said, "The village does not forget those who take advantage of trust." It was an old phrase, a proverb passed down through generations, and in this moment, it carried the weight of centuries of communal justice. The cousin bowed his head. There was nowhere to run. There was no denying it. The truth surrounded him from all sides. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Two women stood up at the back of the church. They looked at each other. Then, with courage that only comes from shared despair, they walked to the front. "We too," said the first, her voice breaking. "He did this to us too." The church fell deadly silent. 2 years ago, the second woman continued. "He courted me, promised marriage, said he loved me. And when I mentioned my inheritance..." She paused, swallowing hard. "He disappeared." The first woman nodded. "With me, it was different. He stayed long enough to get access to my bank accounts. Then he invented an excuse, a family emergency. Never came back." They looked at the bride, tears streaming. "We saw the wedding news, recognized his name, but we thought, maybe with you it would be different. Maybe he had changed." The bride descended from the altar. She walked to the two women and hugged them. A long embrace, acknowledging shared pain, shared betrayal. "He hasn't changed," she whispered. "But we will make sure this ends here." The groom watched it all. His defense, already weak, completely crumbled. There was no more rationalizing, no more playing the victim. He was what he always was, not desperate, predatory. And now, everyone knew. For the first time, the bride allowed emotion to wash over her. not anger, grief. She was grieving the love that never existed, the person she thought he was, the dreams she had to bury. A tear rolled down her face. Only one. She wiped it away quickly. Then, she looked at the groom one last time. And when she spoke, her voice carried both strength and vulnerability. "I loved who I thought you were," she said. "I respect who I truly am." Those words resonated through the church like a hymn, pure emancipation, crystallized in a single phrase. The bride turned. She held the divorce papers firmly. Her family moved to surround her, her lawyer by her side. The two women who came forward walked behind her, and the entire congregation, as if moved by a collective instinct, stood up. She walked down the aisle, head held high, steps firm, every movement a declaration. Behind her, the groom remained at the altar, alone, exposed, legally impotent, socially destroyed. No one went to comfort him. No one offered words of solace. Justice, on this day, had no pity to offer. When the bride reached the church doors, she paused, just for a moment. She looked back, not at the groom, but at the people who supported her. "Thank you," she said simply, "for bearing witness, for believing, for standing on the side of truth." Then she walked out the door. Sunlight enveloped her, and behind her, the community followed, leaving the groom with nothing but the echo of his own lies. But the story didn't end at the altar. What she did next would become legend, because this woman, who transformed her wedding day into her day of liberation, had one more move to make, one that would ensure no other woman suffered at the hands of this man again. And when the dust settled, everyone would know. She didn't just come to protect herself, she came to change everything. In the days that followed, the bride's life began to take a shape she never imagined possible. She returned to her business, not as someone who escaped tragedy, but as someone who chose truth over comfort. And that choice would change everything. The groom, for his part, faced the consequences that deservedly awaited him. The evidence she had gathered not only exposed his betrayal, but also initiated a legal process for attempted financial fraud. The court showed no mercy. The meticulous plan to steal her fortune, documented in every message, in every recorded conversation, became irrefutable evidence of his criminal intentions. But the real twist came when other victims began to emerge. Two women, from different cities, read about the case in the news, and something stirred within them. One was a tech entrepreneur, 38 years old, who had lost half of her company in a suspicious divorce. The other, an owner of a coffee shop chain, 32 years old, who barely escaped a marriage where her partner tried to transfer properties into his name weeks before the ceremony. Both had met the same man at different times. He used slightly different names, fabricated professions, but the pattern was identical. Intense charm, accelerated romantic promises, and always a sudden and strategic interest in their finances. When the stories came to light, the community realized something terrifying. This was not an isolated error in judgment. He was a serial financial predator, refining his technique with each victim. The cousin, who had been an accomplice in the scheme, also faced charges. His own family, horrified by the betrayal, publicly disowned him. What was once a private farce was now a public scandal. And at the center of it all, the bride was no longer seen merely as a rich woman. She was seen as a wise woman. But true wisdom doesn't just come from escaping danger. It comes from what you do with the pain after it passes. The bride began attending therapy. She knew that no public victory could heal the internal wounds that the betrayal had opened. Her therapist helped her rebuild her ability to trust, not others, but herself, in her intuition, in her strength. "You didn't fail by trusting him," the therapist said in one of the sessions. "You triumphed by acting when the truth appeared." And that sentence changed everything. She realized that her story shouldn't end with her. It should start with her. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, the bride did something extraordinary. She used part of her fortune to create a non-profit foundation, the Character Test Initiative. The goal was simple, yet revolutionary: to teach women how to identify patterns of financial and emotional manipulation in relationships. The foundation offered free workshops, legal consultations, and even discreet investigators for women who suspected they were being deceived. But the most powerful component was the financial literacy program. Because she understood something profound. Financially independent women are targets, but they are also the most capable of protecting themselves if they know what to look for. "I don't want other women to have to go through what I went through," she said in a televised interview. "I want them to have the tools to protect their hearts and their assets before it's too late." The media began covering her story not as a tragedy, but as leadership. Newspapers called her the woman who chose herself. Talk shows invited her to share her journey, and in every appearance, she said the same thing. The greatest act of self-love isn't choosing the right partner. It's having the courage to dismiss the wrong one. But her transformation didn't stop at the foundation. She strategically expanded her businesses, not out of greed, but out of purpose. Every company she bought or created had a component of female empowerment embedded within it. Her beauty salon began offering free self-esteem consultations. Her clothing store created a mentorship program for budding entrepreneurs. Her event company started organizing seminars on healthy relationships. And then, something unexpected happened. A year after the scandal, she met someone. Not at a glamorous party or a social event, but at a foundation meeting. He was a volunteer lawyer, helping women prosecute fraudulent partners. He didn't know who she was when he introduced himself. He showed no interest in her fortune. He showed interest in her mission. They talked for hours about justice, about character, about what it means to build something true. And when she finally revealed that she was the organization's founder, he didn't change. He didn't become more attentive. He didn't become more charming. He remained exactly who he was. And that, she realized, was everything. They began to meet, without haste, without exaggerated promises, without plans for marriage in 3 months. Just slow, consistent, honest building. "This time," she told a friend, "I'm not looking for someone to complete my life. I'm looking for someone who respects the life I've already built." And he respected. But her true legacy was not in her own relationship. It was in what her story inspired. Other women began to act. An entrepreneur in São Paulo hired an investigator after noticing inconsistencies in her fiancé's story. She discovered he had 3 other fiancés in different cities. A teacher in Recife postponed her wedding to conduct character tests and discovered her partner was hiding gambling debts. A doctor in Porto Alegre canceled her wedding 2 weeks prior after her friends, inspired by the bride's story, insisted on checking his past. Every woman who saved herself was a link in a chain of protection that began with a courageous bride at an altar. The cultural conversation shifted. Marriage stopped being seen only as a declaration of love. It began to be seen as a test of character. And this change saved lives. It saved fortunes. It saved futures. Schools began inviting the bride to give lectures. She spoke to packed rooms of teenagers, teaching them about financial autonomy, about self-esteem, about the difference between love and manipulation. "You can't control if someone will try to deceive you," she would say, "but you can control if you will allow it." And at every lecture, young people would stand up to thank her, to tell their own stories, to say that she had changed the way they viewed relationships. Her story became a modern parable. People called her the bride who chose herself. And the story was told from mother to daughter, from friend to friend, from generation to generation. Ancient folklore said that ancestors always knew the truth before us. And this bride proved it. Because ancestors always said, "Test character before giving your heart. Observe actions, not words. And never, ever, trust someone who is more interested in your money than in your essence." She lived this wisdom, and by living it, she passed it on. 2 years after that day at the altar, her foundation had already helped more than 2,000 women. 15 criminal cases were opened against financial scammers. 32 marriages were canceled before they became legal disasters, and hundreds of women learned to protect themselves. The bride was no longer just a survivor. She was a guardian, a mentor, a living legend. And in a final interview, years later, when asked what she would say to that version of herself, standing at the altar, holding divorce papers, she replied, "I would say, You entered that ceremony thinking you had lost everything. You left realizing you had saved everything, including yourself. Ancestors always knew, a heart that chooses truth over comfort becomes unbreakable. And she didn't just prove it. She taught it. She didn't just escape a thief. She became a guardian for others. And that, in the end, is what transforms a personal story into a legacy. Now let me ask you, who is listening to this story? What would you do if you discovered a betrayal before it was too late? Many of us want to believe that we would have the same courage. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite it. It is choosing the truth even when it hurts. It is protecting your future even when the present seems to crumble. If you are in a relationship, test character in small moments. True love survives transparency. If someone hides, changes the subject, or reacts with anger when you ask legitimate questions, that's not love. It's control. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it. Because maybe, just maybe, you will be the link that saves a life, a fortune, a future. This bride taught us that strength is not never being betrayed. Strength is acting when you discover the betrayal, and wisdom is not never making mistakes. Wisdom is transforming the mistake into protection for others. If you liked this story of resilience, wisdom, and empowerment, subscribe to the channel. Every week, we bring real stories of people who chose the truth, even when the world expected them to choose comfort. Like this video, share it with someone who needs strength today. And remember, your life is your responsibility. Your heart is your territory. And you have the right and the duty to protect both. The bride in this video now lives surrounded by a community that respects her. She found true love, built on honesty. She created a legacy that protects other women. She transformed her pain into purpose. And every day, when she wakes up, she knows a truth that many take a lifetime to learn. She didn't need a partner to be complete. She needed courage to protect who she already was. And that's exactly what she did. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.